If you're tired of these promos, supporters get the podcast early and ad-free. Just go to donate.bogosity.tv for the links to sign up. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of June 19, 2022. The podcast that turns right round, baby, right round like a record. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's chlorize the news of the bogus. According to the EU's new terrorist content regulation, which came into effect on the 7th, websites are required, on pain of fines in the billions of euros, to take down terrorist content. In 1 hour. Even if that's the middle of the night in their time zone. Not only platforms, but also cloud services must remove posts, music, live streams, photos, audio, and videos that incite violence and glorify terrorist attacks. And it has to be done on the demand of any EU member nation. Not only must the content be removed within 1 hour after being flagged, they'll have to take proactive steps to make sure similar content isn't uploaded again. If they fail, they can be fined up to 4% of their global revenue. Despite assurances from the EU that only genuine terrorist content will be removed and that the context is to be taken into account, the stiff penalties means that websites are just going to take down all reported content instantly. To make matters worse, as we've covered before, even if it is genuine terrorist content, it's better to leave it up, because removing it doesn't stop the terrorist activity, but it does inhibit the ability of security forces and law enforcement to monitor terrorist activity and collect evidence that could be used to prosecute terrorists. As far as the claim that the content will radicalize people into becoming terrorists, that just hasn't been shown either. People become terrorists because of personal tragedies and traumas, not from reading social media posts. And all of that is assuming that the reports are trustworthy, the law won't be abused, and reporting agencies won't make any mistakes. We know that's bogus. When Facebook was forced to take down terrorist content, they removed content not only from activists, but also journalists reporting on terrorist activity and removed documented evidence of war crimes. Also, remember when France back in 2019 declared that much of the Internet Archive was terrorist content and demanded it be removed? Including all of Project Gutenberg, the Grateful Dead, and even the Smithsonian? The Internet Archive is a 501c3 nonprofit located in San Francisco, California. They have less than 200 employees, and the notice came in at 3 a.m. Pacific time. The Internet Archive wrote in their blog, quote, "How can the proposed legislation realistically be said to honor freedom of speech if these are the types of reports that are currently coming from EU law enforcement and designated government reporting entities? It is not possible for us to process these reports using human review within a very limited time frame like 1 hour. Are we to simply take what's reported as terrorism at face value and risk the automatic removal of things like the primary collection page for all books on archive.org? Now, that legislation is law in the EU, a law created by the unelected members of the European Commission. It's getting to the point where, between copyrights, hate speech, right to be forgotten, and terrorist content, the only way you'll be able to put anything on the internet is if you get permission from the EU beforehand, even if you've never even set foot in Europe. Say what you like about Russia and China, at least they're honest about wanting to completely censor and control the internet. If you're looking for a way to support this channel, but you don't have any spare cash and you can't stand ads, you can do so by generating your own cryptocurrency. Use the links at the bottom of the description to follow the link to Odyssey.com to listen to the podcast and see all of my YouTube videos as well. Just watching videos will produce cryptocurrency for the creator and yourself. And since Odyssey is always monetized and never censored, you'll have no problem seeing all the videos from your favorite creators. You can also use the library credits you create at Odyssey to tip creators and even purchase paid content. Earn library credits through various rewards, including daily view rewards and the number of shares and invites. And you can interact with creators in all sorts of ways, including like and dislike, comment, boost a post by supporting it, repost it, and share to other sites, all while earning crypto for the creator. Easily monetize yourself and your favorite creators using cryptocurrency without advertising. Use the link below to visit this channel on Odyssey.com and see many of your other favorites there as well. Okay, so if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, you know that the so-called gateway drug theory is bogus. That's the idea that smoking marijuana will lead to much more dangerous drugs like heroin, cocaine, and meth. The drug warriors, including Joe Biden, say that 99% of all illicit drug users tried marijuana before they did any other drugs. Therefore, we need to treat marijuana, which has never been shown to have resulted in a single death in all of human history, exactly like harder drugs. Of course, regular listeners will also know the problem with that statistic. It's meaningless unless you know what percentage of people who never did any harder drugs ever tried marijuana, not to mention the failure to control for other risk factors. Over and over again, proper studies have shown that marijuana just isn't a gateway drug. That's been shored up in studies from states where recreational marijuana has been decriminalized. 4 different nationwide databases show that there was no increase in the abuse of illicit drugs in response to marijuana legalization. And now, a study shows that, if anything, the opposite is the case. Marijuana makes it less likely someone will try harder drugs. The study, published in the July 2022 edition of the Journal of Adolescent Health, found, quote, across years and age groups, the prevalence of substance use other than cannabis was higher among occasional and frequent cannabis users compared to cannabis non-users. However, associations between both occasional and frequent cannabis use and pain reliever misuse, and between frequent cannabis use and heavy episodic drinking, weakened over time among individuals ages 21 to 25. They looked at 6 different cross-sectional surveys analyzing data from 12,694 adults. When you follow marijuana users over time, they become less likely to abuse opioids and alcohol compared to their non-marijuana using counterparts. They did find an association with e-cigarette usage, but noted that vaping has gone up in that age group regardless of legal cannabis, so it's probably unrelated. The authors found, quote, contrary to concerns about spillover effects, implementation of legalized non-medical cannabis coincided with decreases in alcohol and cigarette use and pain reliever misuse. The weakening association of cannabis use with the use of other substances among individuals ages 21 to 25 requires further research, but may suggest increased importance of cannabis-specific prevention and treatment efforts. The findings echo an Israeli study that found that, among opioid users, 93% either decreased their opioid use or stopped entirely following cannabis initiation. Considering that the big problem leading to overdose deaths these days is illicitly manufactured fentanyl, that means that, in addition to being a reverse gateway, it'll actually save lives and reduce overdoses as well. How long is our government going to ignore the data and the facts? If you're still thinking they have your best interests at heart, then ask a politician that next time you see them. It is unconscionable that the war on drugs has continued for so long. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for.
You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass sensors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
So as we've reported, the criminals behind ransomware attacks have gone to greater and greater lengths to ensure you pay up. No longer content to just threaten to destroy your files, which you can defeat with backups, they've been resorting to blackmail, threatening to release the contents of the private data of the companies they target. And now, they just set up a publicly searchable database of the files they've stolen. The ransomware group AlphaV/Blackcat just announced that it hacked a luxury spa and resort. Soon after, it put the website and victim's name and logo on a website which claims to list the information of 1,500 employees and 2,500 residents. There are 2 check yourself buttons, one for employees and the other for guests, so you can see if your data is included in the breach. Of course, that means anyone else with your information can get the data too. Previously, any such sites have only been available on the dark web through Tor, but this one is available on the open internet. Threat analyst Brett Callow said, quote, "Companies will likely be more concerned about the prospect of their data being shared in this way than of simply being posted to an obscure Tor site for which barely anyone knows the URL. It'll piss people off and make class actions more likely." Although the group didn't say if they intend to do this with every victim, they did say to the spa, quote, "We are not going to stop. Our lead distribution department will do their best to bury your business. At this point, you still have a chance to keep your hotel's security and reputation. We strongly advise you to be proactive in your negotiations. You do not have much time." Many experts believe that the group is just a rebranding of DarkSide, which we covered in a previous podcast covering the Colonial Pipeline attack that caused several days of fuel shortage all along the East Coast. Looking on the bright side, Callow did hear from Clop, a different ransomware group. Quote, "On a positive note, stunts like this mean people may actually find out that their personal information has been compromised. Clop emailed my wife last year. The company that lost her data still hasn't made any public disclosure or notified the people who were impacted. At least, she hasn't heard from the company. What's unclear is what the person can do about it. They're hardly in a position to demand the company pay the ransom, and there doesn't seem to be any way to take action against the cybercriminals either. Meaning that all of this will likely continue until the criminals figure out the breaking point that will force compliance. And then the real problems begin.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now it's time to carburize this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who needed a judge to remind her that it's innocent until proven guilty, not the other way around. We've talked about the need for bail reform, and not the kind of bail reform that caused the problem in the first place, the reform spearheaded by Joe Biden and his bestest buddy Strom Thurmond. The only purpose of bail was to make sure the accused showed up for trial, which isn't needed in most cases. Most people just are not going to choose to live the life of a fugitive. So most people awaiting trial were released on their own recognizance. That is, until Biden's Bail Reform Act. Now it's resulted in a system where, if you're rich and connected, you can easily get out of jail while you await trial, but if you're poor, forget about it. They don't have to establish you're a flight risk or even make the bail all that high. Any amount will be enough to stop most poor defendants from going home until trial, which means they're in danger of losing their jobs and their homes when they can't make the rent, which the prosecutors absolutely use to extort plea deals. Or even worse, you have blatantly political prosecutions like those of the Jan 6 defendants who have been held in pre-trial detention without bail for misdemeanors for longer than they would have served if convicted. According to all of Biden's buddies in law enforcement, they just have to do that because if they let them out without bail, they might commit other crimes. Ignoring the whole presumption of innocence thing. Ignorant police officers and psychopathic prosecutors say that all the time, but it's especially bad when it's the person in charge of one of the biggest cities in the U.S. Lightfoot said at a press conference, quote, "Given the exacting standards that the state's attorney has for charging a case, which is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, when those charges are brought, these people are guilty." Oh, geez, where do I start? How about the standard of proof? Beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard for conviction. It is not the standard for bringing a case. The only thing a prosecutor needs to show to bring charges is probable cause in a hearing where the defendant has no right to challenge anything. Even according to the Cook County State Attorney's Office, 1 in 4 people held in pretrial detention go on to be proven innocent. But the big horror was when she said, "These people are guilty." No, they are not, you fascist scum! They are innocent. They're all innocent until you prove them guilty in a court of law, which hasn't happened yet at this point. And yet, she said that people should, quote, "keep pressing the criminal courts to lock up violent, dangerous people and not put them out on bail or electronic monitoring." Oh yeah, electronic monitoring is a thing too. If you're really worried someone is a flight risk, you can just put an ankle monitor on them, and then, if they don't show up to court, you know exactly where they are. That wasn't even an option in the 1,000-year history of bail before Biden's Bail Reform Act. Cook County Chief Circuit Judge Timothy Evans had to remind her of all this. He said in a statement, quote, "I respectfully disagree that the automatic detention and jail of defendants facing certain categories of charges is a constitutional practice under the United States and Illinois constitutions. Pretrial detention serves a legitimate purpose, preventing the serious risk of committing crimes while on pretrial release. Its purpose is not, however, to punish by depriving people of their liberty for crimes for which they have not yet been convicted. At all stages of the justice system, the adjudicator must be unbiased. In our justice system, the accuser is not the adjudicator. A judge, not a prosecutor or law enforcement official, must decide whether an individual shall be deprived of his or her liberty." There's also no evidence that the wave of violence Chicagoans are experiencing is the result of people released from pretrial detention. Of the 4,477 homicides and shooting incidents in Chicago throughout 2021, the total number of people arrested for homicide who were out awaiting trial were 3. 2 for homicide and 1 for non-fatal shooting. Alexandra Block of the Illinois ACLU said, quote, "It is sad to see a highly trained lawyer and former prosecutor so badly mangle the meaning of our Constitution. A charge based solely on assertions of police often is proven unreliable in the city, as evidenced by the city's history of paying large settlements for CPD's role in wrongful convictions." Oh yeah, those statistics I mentioned didn't even include wrongful convictions. Lightfoot has also pushed for increasing the legalized theft known as civil asset forfeiture, which would seize property, quote, "directly or indirectly used or intended for use in any manner to facilitate street gang-related activity." Thankfully, she hasn't had much luck getting it passed by the city council. Among her other fascist tactics include ShotSpotter, a surveillance network that rarely produces evidence of gun-related crimes, but has resulted in police shootings of innocents, and a 10 p.m. curfew of all minors. All this right as she announces her re-election campaign. Block said, quote, "Seeking easy answers to political pressures about gun violence, the mayor has repeatedly attacked bail reform, often with phony data. Mayor Lightfoot would be best served turning her energies to implementing real change in CPD and building relationships with community, essential steps for effective policing. Instead of searching for real solutions, she constantly searches for a scapegoat, whether it is the courts or youth across the city." So all of that makes Lori Lightfoot this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv.
And now let's hyperstimulate this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And this week it goes to the UK's National Crime Agency, whose incompetence has made it so that the British public have been unable to report cybercrimes for 3 years. Daniel Thomas of the security group at the University of Cambridge Computer Laboratory found the problem when he was trying to help someone report a new crypto scam. Quote, "In the end, they got fed up with the difficulty of finding someone they could tell and gave up. However, to give the advice, I thought I would check what the National Crime Agency's National Cybercrime Unit suggested. So I searched NCA, NCCU, report scam, and the first result was for the NCA's Contact Us page. Sounds good. It has a fraud section which, as expected, talks about action fraud. However, since 2019, this page is linked to the National Archives archive of an old version of the action fraud website. So for 3 years, if you followed the NCA's website advice on how to report fraud, you would have got very confused until you worked out you were on a clearly labeled archive rather than the proper website, which is why none of the forms work. 2019 is also the year Police Scotland declined to pay for action fraud because they didn't consider it valuable enough. While it does say the site was archived on 11 January 2019, much more prominent is a yellow banner which reads, "Some users are currently experiencing problems accessing the website. We are aware of the issue and are working towards a resolution. If you are experiencing problems, please try clearing your browser cache and refresh the page." Which, of course, won't work because it's an archive! Thomas reported the problem on the 13th. Time will tell how long it takes them to correct the issue, but as of this podcast prep 4 days later, it still points to the archive. So all of that makes the NCA this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this "He's about as effective as a cat flap in an elephant house" edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Buckminster Fuller. "Politicians are always realistically maneuvering for the next election. They are obsolete as fundamental problem solvers." The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
We live in a world where light bulbs connect to the internet, and recent attacks on them prove that your online security is under threat like never before. Not only your websites, but the internet-enabled devices you buy. And the biggest problem is weak passwords. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords on the web and on your internet-enabled devices, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers, all your computers, and even your mobile devices, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, software licenses, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications, manage passwords for your entire family, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now.